up. Get ready. It's going to be a very, very intense journey.
What's up, everyone? Austin Eller here, episode 149 of Frame Skip, the Frame Skip podcast. It's been a little while, been a few weeks, and I am glad to be back here with my best friend ever in the whole wide world, George from Short Black Summary.
Suck it, Seth. I'm number one.
How's it feel, George? How's it feel to be the best of the best?
It feels fantastic, Austin. I mean, I feel sorry for Coach that he had to find out this way, but again,
who are you talking about?
Our friend who disappeared from our podcast, like Marty's older brother in Back to the Future in that photograph.
Good reference. What a great movie, man. Back to the Future franchise. Look, I gotta say, even 3 is pretty good. I know people don't necessarily agree with that, but I still think 3 is a very enjoyable film.
Once a month on USA, I still have cable. I'm that asshole. Once a month on USA, they just do all 3 of them on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And Austin, I gotta tell you, what a way to spend a Sunday. Just hanging out with Doc Brown and Marty and just see what kind of adventures they get into. It's usually the same adventures, but it's always fun. It's always exciting, you know?
Am I wrong? Didn't they make an animated show or something?
Oh, they sure did. Austin.
I never watched that. So I have no context of how quality that is or is not.
It's kind of like Doctor Who, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. The more you know. You saying that, though, made me think of back in the day, in middle school on TBS. I think it was every Saturday night, they would rotate through Lucasfilm movies. And so they would go one weekend, one Saturday was all 3 at the time Indiana Jones movies. And then the next Saturday would be all 3 original Star Wars trilogy movies. And they just go through those and then they would hit the prequels at some point. But I just remember sitting there on Saturday nights, just binging all of those movies over and over and over again one summer when I was maybe in 6th grade. It's great.
That's adult Toonami, I guess, right?
Yes.
Oh shit, 10 o'clock, gotta hit up TBS. Yeah. It's really funny. During COVID, the first week everything shut down. CBS brought back their old Sunday night movie, which is something they used to do. And the very first one they did, I think, back in the day for Sunday night movie, was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that was the first one they did for COVID. So I just remember having nothing to do, and then just seeing CBS was oh fuck it, Raiders is a pretty good movie still. And I don't know what it is. Maybe you can contribute to this, but this is something I've noticed. Mm-hmm. I own Seinfeld on DVD. Did we talk about this recently? I own Seinfeld on DVD. It's on Netflix, so I have instant access to it. And there is nothing more exciting to me than flipping through the channels and seeing Seinfeld on Comedy Central.
On TV.
That is the most exciting. Yeah, it's seeing random reruns that you're not selecting is somehow the most exciting thing. When there's a movie you want to watch that you didn't choose to watch,
right?
Incredible.
I understand it though, because it's okay, when this is how I feel, at least. I don't know how you feel, but when I'm watching something and I've got the DVD or I've got the Blu-ray or it's on streaming, I'm typically going through an order and going episode by episode by episode. I'm never just going from season 2, episode 3 to season 6, episode 5, in one sitting. So I think there is something exciting about it showing up on TV and you're what random episode is this going to be? I don't know. It's just, it's something, there's something nice about that.
They had that, everyone was so excited when Netflix got Seinfeld, which was so confusing to me because before that, Hulu had Seinfeld, it was available.
Right.
And one thing they had on Hulu that, other channels have done in the past, and I think it's awesome, is they actually had, playlists of episodes. So you could see every episode where Jerry and whoever went down to, Boca del Vista, where the retirement home where Jerry's parents live, and that was just its own thing. Every episode featuring iconic characters. So you had the soup Nazi, and then with Putty where he dressed up like the devil and scared that old Italian priest, just shit like that. And USA used to do marathons of Law and Order SVU, where it's just the world's most dangerous blondes, you know, like they would just like have themes of like all the murders, like stabbing night, you know, and it was just like every knife victim, you know, it was just random shit like that. And man, that stuff's cool. Like, give me that. Give me that, you know, just like put this familiar secondhand content into a blender and repurpose it into something vaguely new for me. I could get behind that.
It's very interesting. So,
it's not, but thank you for saying that.
Well, you know, that's my transition word to go into George. What have you been up to for the past, I think it's been 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks since we last recorded? I can't recall.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, our last episode came out March 20th, so it's been
a little bit.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
I've been mostly reading comics. I actually haven't touched a lot of video games.
Yes.
I've touched two video games that I've talked about, I think, the last 3 episodes we've been on together. But man, I've been catching up on my Marvels. I've been catching up on my DCs. My goal is by this summer to be caught up on all my monthly books so that I can just read them the second I get them.
Yeah.
And man, it's so much fun. I'm recording an episode. I'm banking shit for Short Box Summary so I can start releasing that again. And so far, I have 2 normal episodes and like a 3rd episode. I'm supposed to record a movie episode, so I want to get to like 4 or 5 episodes so I can start releasing them. And one of the episodes, I was just so in love with every book I was reading. And like some of them are just fine. Some of them are genuinely amazing. But just the disposable nature of that entertainment where it just comes through. It's hanging out with you for 22 pages and then you just have to wait or move on. It's up to you.
Yeah.
And DC's been killing it. I'm catching up on an event that I don't love the event so far. I think the premise is really interesting. It's called Lazarus Planet. And it's like the Lazarus Pits, basically, that Ra's al Ghul uses to come back from the dead. Gets kind of messed up by this other character called the Devil Nezha. Anyway, it turns into a volcano and then it just erupts. And so like there's this Lazarus rain that's coating the planet. And this was like a big event that happened last year. And it's not like a typical comic book event where it's like issues 1 through 8 and then here's like a plot that's moving forward. It's actually just like a series of anthologies on different characters and how they react to it. So like it's
pretty cool.
And there's like 5 or 6 main books and there's like 3 or 4 stories in each of those, just showing them dealing with shitty situations. And I'm reading that so I can get all caught up on my DC books. So that's last year's event. I'm caught up on most of my regulars for DC, but I'm mostly a Marvel podcast. And man, Marvel's killing it right now. They just killed the X-Men as we know it. The Krakoa era is finally over. And so they're relaunching all those titles again this summer. I'm going to grab a couple of them because Gail Simone is coming back. I really like her as a writer. Jed MacKay, who I think is the best writer at Marvel right now. He's doing Doctor Strange. He's doing Avengers. He's doing Moon Knight, which are 3 of my favorite books. Him on X-Men, like sign me up, please. Like I'll be there. So catching up on comics, video game front. A lot of Final Fantasy 2, a lot of Helldivers too. I'm in my sequels era, you know.
Yeah, I need to get back to reading comics. I renewed my Marvel Unlimited subscription for like a year because it's just dirt cheap.
Yeah.
I renewed it back when Spider-Man 2 came out, and I was reading the Venom series for a while, and I kind of fell off at one point, I think, because I got caught up with Alan Wake 2 at the time. I was kind of in the mix with that, and kind of pulled me away from comics, but I need to get my money's worth out of the subscription, so I need to get back to it. But I do want to try and read some more modern stuff. Not that the Venom series is not, but since I've gotten that tablet 2 or 3 years ago, whenever that was, I haven't really tried to read anything current, like as it's coming out. And so I'd like to try that. I mean, certainly some of the stuff you named sounds interesting to me. And I was aware of the whole kind of X-Men, I guess, reboot, however you want to call it, restart. And so that seems like a good place to, relaunch. That seems like a good place to kind of jump in.
It does. Do you remember how much you paid for your Marvel Unlimited? I can't remember how much it costs. It's like $70.
70, I think, for a year.
Okay. Yeah. Comics are getting more expensive. Like they're adding more content, but it's basically like $5 a pop now for a single issue.
Right.
So that's 15 comics is a year's worth of Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sweet deal.
It
DC is doing the same thing. And for them, I think DC technically offers a better product. I think Marvel has like more books on their service. But DC, there's only a 1-month delay between a book hitting the stands and then a book hitting DC Infinite. And Marvel, there's a 3-month delay. So either one is great. I use both of them, and I still buy the single issues. Like I'm a maniac. I really just want to like support the industry that I love so much. So I've no problem. Plus, I live in fucking Maine, where I don't do anything or go anywhere, so I can spend some money on comics. It's okay. But DC Infinite is like $100 a year, so that's 20 books.
Still good.
You know?
Yeah. I'd say honestly, anything below like 150 is still like pretty cheap, and even that you could argue is still cheap. I mean, it's all relative, I suppose, but for $70 for Marvel Unlimited, I think that's about what it is, if I'm recalling correctly, for the year. That's nothing, like you said. I mean, that's just a small amount of comics, and you get every single comic for the most part that they've ever released, which is astounding.
Yeah, and they're really good. Like it's basically to the day every book that just came out on Marvel Unlimited that's like new this week. That's every book that came out that exact day 3 months earlier. So like all their current stuff is there, just with a delay, trying to help stores sell issues and move issues, and it's working on me because like I gotta know what's happening in Star Wars. I gotta know what's happening in Moon Knight. But an amazing back catalog, and if you are interested in comic books from the 2000s, there's a podcast, and I never read anything that's not available on Marvel Unlimited, just to make sure everyone has access to it. So
very good.
But yeah, Final Fantasy 2, what a fucking game, Austin.
So yeah, how far in are you? Like what are you, how many hours in, I guess, are you?
I hit 12 last night.
Okay.
So I think I'm roughly halfway, but it's like I'm playing with like the speed modifier on, I'm playing with the XP modifier on. I really just want to see the game. I don't want to
rightfully so
internalize the game. Like, I'm sure this would be the greatest game I ever played if I was there in 1989, day and date. But I really just want to see what all the hype is. And man, the story is incredible. Like it's shocking to me that I know they've tweaked it obviously from like the original release, but I can't believe that like this and the first Final Fantasy happened on the same console. Like it's astounding, It
feels like such an upgrade. And I mean, yeah, I my only experience with it, I don't know if this is your only experience, but my only experience is the version you're playing, the Pixel Remaster. Did you ever play 1 or 2 in any consequence, like the original versions?
I think I played Origins a little bit on PSP because that felt like a steal. Because that PS1 Classic was $10 and you got 2 games, so that felt like you were cheating. Yeah,
I never played either of those games prior to the Pixel Remasters, but it is really interesting to go from 1 to 2, which, like you said, we're on the same system, and just 2 feels like such a massive upgrade.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I mean, frankly, you could tell me the second one was a Super Nintendo game, and I would believe you on that because of how much more grand in scale it is. Yeah.
It's like substantial it is, right? Like there's just so much more there. And like, this is going to sound weird to say, and I have such limited experience with Final Fantasy, but like 1 seems like the least Final Fantasy game of them all. Like 1 feels like the outlier because it's just Dungeons and Dragons. Like that's all that one is. Like they even use like the D&D like magic system,
I still like one.
Oh no, I did too. I think it's really charming. I think the story, like I actually didn't know who the final boss was going to be, so when it turns out to be that person, I was just like, oh shit, like that's really good.
There's some really interesting story stuff that they kind of tie all together, although like the beginning and end are awesome, but the middle part, there's really nothing of consequence going on. So
you're going all these different kingdoms, you're meeting all these people.
Yeah.
It feels like a post-apocalyptic world because like you don't really see a lot of people, you really just see the monsters. So like that's kind of interesting. You go into like this weird swamp place, that's kind of cool. But Final Fantasy 2, for all intents and purposes, like it's just fucking Star Wars, right? Like they assemble like the Iron airship, the Dreadnought.
Yep.
Which is just the Death Star, right? Like, and there's a princess who's leading a rebellion, Princess Hilda, and we just retook Castle Flynn, so like that's really exciting. I'm a little annoyed with myself that I'm playing like with a guide, and I'm not like doing any story stuff with a guide because I don't need to, but I just don't want to miss any treasure chest or beasts in my whatever it's called, my catalog.
2 is not quite as bad when it comes to what I'm about to say, but 1 I had to play with a guide because it was just like, and I know we talked about this on the last episode, but it's just like you come out of the castle at the beginning and then he just like, go somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's like essentially the only direction you get the rest of the game. I mean, there are a few points where they're like, go west, go north, but they don't really give you any solid details as to what you're supposed to be looking for. So
I think now you're kind of dumb if you need someone to tell you what to do next in a video game because they just telegraph everything. The only game that doesn't really is like Breath of the Wild, right? Where you're just like, no, I literally have no idea what to do in this game because there's no
that's
direction.
the point of that game, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. But everything else is just like, people complain about like, you know, the yellow edge on like a ledge to like show you that you can climb up. Like,
give me those yellow edges.
I want to know where to go. I want to know like what I can interact with, especially as games get more realistic. It actually seems like you can almost like interact with things less. So just like let me know so I don't waste my time. But the fact that like if you're not paying attention, you're just like I have no idea what to do next in this game. So it's pretty easy to get lost. And I'm a pretty forgetful person. Like if I read the first like 8 issues of Superman, and then I read 100 other comics, and now it's like up to issue 11. I'm like, I kind of remember what happened, but I'm realistically just going to go back and reread those first 8 issues. That said, with Final Fantasy 2, I remember everything, and like I didn't touch it for like 4 or 5 weeks, but I knew exactly where I was. I was like, yeah, I just went to the Coliseum. I was tricked there. Now I need to go back. Hilda's no longer in Flynn after it was attacked. She's set up a rebel camp up north, and then we have to take back Castle Flint. Like I knew everything that was going on in the story without having touched it in so long, which really doesn't happen very often with me. I'm probably outing myself as a big old dum-dum here, and that's fine. It's true. But the fact that it stuck with me for so long, like there's something special about this game, and I don't know if I'm trying to make it special or if it's inherently special on its own, you know?
Okay, so I want to, while we're on this topic, this is kind of a pivot, but I want to ask you this because I heard somebody talking about this on a podcast the other day. I forget which one it was that I was listening to, but they were talking about how much or how often you retain story beats from like a movie, a book, a game, a comic. And maybe I'm just brain dead, George. I don't know. I really don't know. But unless it's like one of my favorite games, like Metal Gear, you know, Control, Alan Wake, or, you know, movies as well, you know, or whatever it may be, TV shows, I feel like I don't retain like literally anything in the long term. I think back on stuff from like my childhood or movies that I watched 5 years ago, and like 75% of the time I could not tell you what happens in that piece of media.
I make a joke about this all the time, saying like I call it cup science, where, you know, this is gonna sound so sappy, I don't even give a shit. Girlfriend will be like, I love you. I'm like, I love you more, and she's like, no, you don't. We love each other the same. I'm like, no, I'm bigger, so there's more love of me to give. So like I literally love you more. You're so small compared to me, you know. I feel like that's kind of you in art too, and like I think this is like kind of stolen from like Kevin Smith in like Dogma or whatever, where they're talking about faith. But it's like when you're small, you have such a little cup, so it's easy to fill it, and then as you get bigger, you need a bigger cup, and so it becomes harder to fill. Right. But also like you're just, especially you, because you work in news, like you're just inundated with so many stories, so many images, true. So many things, and so it's like your hard drive is fucking packed at this point, you know. And compared to when you were a kid, like those seminal moments where you were talking about like Star Wars every week, how many other movies did you watch a week? Like how many new movies did you watch a week?
Not many.
Yeah, so you just got to internalize like this one thing, right? And so like same thing with games, where it's like, yeah, man, like I think it's a Maya Angelou, like you can forget what people say, you can forget what people do, but you never forget how they made you feel. And so like I can't describe more than like maybe 4 levels from Super Mario Galaxy, which is like one of my favorite games of all time. But I could write an essay on like comparing it to meals or comparing it to moments in my life just playing that game. Like that is the thing I remember.
That's interesting.
And I think that's like probably ultimately more important, is like how something made you feel, as opposed to like having a perfectly encyclopedic knowledge. That's cool if you can do that, but just because you can't, like the joke about like a girl wearing like a, you know, Led Zeppelin shirt. It's like, oh yeah, you love Led Zeppelin so much, like name all their songs. It's like, dude, fuck you. Like that doesn't, it's not love, you jackass. That's a flashcard.
Yeah.
you nerd.
I just find it interesting because like I have people in my life, and like Andie's one of them, where she'll like recall every single episode of like something she watched when she was a kid, or specific moments of a TV show. But it's like, dude, again, maybe there's just something wrong with my head. I don't know, but I cannot recall like a single thing from a TV show that I watched when I was a child. I mean, I can remember watching them, but I can't remember like story beats and things that happen in them. But I do agree with you. I can certainly remember like feelings associated with them, or times, I guess, like that part of my life that I was in as I was partaking in said show or movie or whatever it may have been. Like for me, PS3, just as an example, like PS3 was a very like early high school, middle school driven like system for me. And so I like highly identify, Infamous 1, Infamous 2 with like 8th grade, 7th grade, whenever that was, when those came out. And so I kind of get that, but like I could not tell you a single thing that happens in those games at all, except for I think it's at the end of 2 where Cole dies.
Yeah.
Depending on the choice you make.
Yeah.
So that's like the only thing I remember. But I don't know. Just a random thought that had come to me.
I think you're 100% right. I think I'm more like Andie, where I do remember that stuff, but I remember the stuff from my childhood way better because that was like really formative to me. I remember everything about Dragon Ball Z because I would just like race home, and like that was like it was the most important thing in the world to me to watch Dragon Ball Z. And gotta get pumped. The Garlic Saga's coming up. He looks like a cool villain. Whatever. And like Gundam Wing, but like these formative like foundational blocks to like who I would eventually become as a person. And like certain movies that like I haven't seen Anchorman in probably 3 or 4 years at this point.
Yeah.
But like I still remember every line from that movie, and I can't say it on hand right now. But like if you were to put Anchorman on, it would be like a reflex where I could just quote the entire movie as we watch it.
Wow. Maybe I just have a problem. But
no, I don't think you have a problem.
To be fair, like with what I experience on a day-to-day basis, I mean, even me, I was going through the other day on our website, and I realized that I had written like, it was some ridiculous number, dude. I've written like 4,000 articles or something like that, 5,000 articles in my 5 years at my current company. And even that, I just in my head was thinking about this the other day of like all the stuff that I've written and I just could not tell you happened or recall in any way.
I'm not saying it's a you thing. Like I put probably like 50 hours into Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
And my friend is just like, hey man, like let's go for the platinum. That I was like, okay. And then I like loaded it up and I was like, man, I can't remember how to do shit in this game. Like how do you fight in this game? Yeah. And like thankfully Square has been like pretty good about putting in like combat trials, like outside, like in the main menu, you can get like a combat refresher, which is fucking genius. And every game should do that. That's not like a shooter that, uses the same 8 buttons. But like, I was like, dude, I've summoned so much shit. Like I've done so many like the warp strike attacks, but like I don't know how to do that despite having done it 3,000 times before, like in that game, So it's not just a you thing. It's just like, I guess Final Fantasy 15 didn't really matter to me, and like that's
but that is a good point, because aside from memories, thinking about like game mechanics and controls, sometimes that's a hard thing to go back to when you haven't touched them in a while. But there are certain games that are overly complicated, but because they're really special to me, I can easily go back to them, that even years later. So like Mario Kart, always going to be one that like I don't need to practice on. I haven't played Mario Kart 8 in like a year, and I know that if I pick it up right now, I'm going to be good to go. Metal Gear Solid 5 is another one. That game I played like 400 hours of, and I'll randomly boot that up still. And even with how complicated the mechanics are in that game, it still clicks. And then I'd say the most complicated, frankly, is Monster Hunter. I can always somehow, I don't know how, I can always pick up Monster Hunter. And I'm like, it's like you said, it's muscle memory for like the combos and how the weapons work and stuff like that. So that's another interesting part of it, I suppose, of your memory as a gamer.
Yeah, right. Like it's weird too. And sorry, is there anything you want to talk about that you've been playing lately?
I'll hit on a couple things. Should I hit on them now, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hit on it now because we're getting dangerously close to our main topic.
I see. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I didn't think about that. So I've been playing a couple things here and there. I've been a little busy this past week, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to play. But over the past few weeks, I've really gotten more so into Doom Eternal. And I can't remember if I brought this up on the last podcast or not. I know I've mentioned it a few months back that I was playing it, but I kind of took a pause on it and was waiting for our PC upgrade. So we ended up upgrading, I guess it's been like a month and a half, to a 4070 Super in our PC here, and like running Doom Eternal with ray tracing on, max settings, 1440p. And it's running at like 200 frames a second or something ridiculous. It's such a pleasant experience, man. That game is so good. And I get some of the complaints. I could definitely see how it would be a little confusing or challenging if you were playing on console, because mechanically there's a lot more going on in this game than in 2016. And I just think that the thought of playing with a controller sounds confusing to me, because even on keyboard and mouse, like there are so many buttons you're like constantly pressing as you're like using the flamethrower and the grenades and the chainsaw and the melee. Like there's just so much going on at one time. But on PC it works great. So for me, I'm getting toward the end. I think I've got 2 missions left. I'm like 12 hours in, 13 hours in, and
oh damn.
Frankly, I think it's quite a bit better than Doom 2016. And maybe it's just because I haven't played 2016 in a while, but for me, like the mechanics of this, just everything works so perfectly together. It's like a flawless shooter, in my opinion. Like there's nothing I really have a problem with.
Is it making you rethink ever playing a shooter with a controller ever again?
Yes. And Doom 2016 did that to me too. So when I played 2016, I would say up to now, that was probably my favorite shooter of all time. This is probably going to overtake it. But yeah, I mean, certainly after I played 2016 back in the day, I was like, man, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. Now, I've come and gone over the past few years. I've played a lot more shooters with controller again, but I think at the end of the day, it's all personal preference, but there's something just exciting to me about playing with keyboard and mouse. And so for that reason, at some point, I'm looking forward to playing the Dark Forces remastered keyboard and mouse. I haven't picked that up yet, but I want to play it. So a little bit of that. Not a whole lot going on, but some of that. Fortnite continuing to play. I think we kind of hit it every few days. There's a new season that started not too long ago, so they just added Avatar, The Last Airbender skins into it. So they've got Korra that you can get right now, and then they're about to add in Aang and Katara and Sokka, I think. So
is that a social game for you? Like, do you have buddies you?
No, that's the game Andie and I have jumped on. There was a while, obviously, where we would be playing Monster Hunter or whatever else we had co-op, but lately that's been our game together. We'll hop on at least every couple nights and play duos together. So we want to play with more people, but so far it's kind of just been us. Nobody I know really plays it, to be honest.
When I was playing, like, I for some reason decided to try it around like my 30th birthday, and I turned 30 like in 2020, like peak COVID.
Yeah,
like in July, like peak shutdowns. And so I remember just that was the first day I ever had Popeyes, because there was a Popeyes, and I was like, I want a fried chicken sandwich. So ordered like 6 of those to the house for Leah and I just like got drunk turning 30, and Fabio came online, and we were just messing around with Fortnite, seeing what it was about.
Nice.
And I felt like a god my first couple matches. I didn't know they kind of like set it up for you to win your first couple matches. Just to give you a bite.
I had that same experience. I won the first game I ever played, and I was like, wow, look at this. I'm so good.
I am, in fact, a god. Yeah. It's like a Mina Kimes. She's like a TV on-air personality for ESPN, and she says the key to being a successful quarterback is either believing in God or believing you are God, and that those are the only 2 people who ever make it as a quarterback, which that was how I felt about Fortnite. When I was playing, though, I noticed that there was a bunch of people who like playing the game wasn't the main concern. Exploring the game was like the main concern. Is that still
Yes.
part of
And
it? Okay.
it took me a while to get used to that. When I first started playing, and again, this was a conversation we had several months ago on the podcast, but I first started playing because, and I guess, hey, if you're watching, this kind of makes sense now based off my background. I first started playing because Solid Snake was being added to the game. And, he's my favorite character of all time when it comes to a video game. And so I just had to jump in there. And this is kind of overcomplicated, I guess, for people who are not familiar with Fortnite, but he was released halfway through the season. And to acquire him, you had to do these like match quests, these like daily type quests of, I forget what they were. I remember clearly one of them, because it was a pain in the ass, was do a certain amount of damage to enemies with a sniper rifle that has a silencer, which makes sense for Solid Snake. So there were like 10 of those, I think, that you had to run through to get Solid Snake and then Old Snake from Metal Gear Solid 4. And until those quests came out, Andie and I were just rolling through, just playing the game, doing whatever we wanted. Those quests then dropped, and it kind of, I don't know, it gave me some new light on the game that I didn't otherwise think about, of, playing the game a certain way to beat these quests. But it actually, it forces you to play in ways that you wouldn't normally play in. And I found that actually quite enjoyable. I was a little surprised by that. I'm normally not one to be like, oh God, I don't want to use this gun just because the game's telling me I have to use this gun for this quest. But there was something about it that worked for me. And so I've continued to do that now, especially with the new season, rolling through all these different quests of, slide a certain amount or vault 50 times in a day, stuff like that. Just random little things that add up into various quests. So that's essentially, George, to go back to your initial question, a lot of people still play that way, and I'm becoming one of them, where you're trying to go see the new areas of the map and get the new items and see what's going on there. And while you're doing that, maybe knock out a few quests so that you can get more experience and items or whatever that may be. So I actually am finding that part of the game pretty rewarding, surprisingly.
Sick.
So that's really it, though. I touched a little bit of Jedi Survivor on PS5, but not a whole lot. So I don't really have a whole lot to say.
I love you. You are one of my favorite people I've ever met. You're being kind of a brat about that game. That's the meanest I want to get about it, because you are such a sweet guy and you look really vulnerable right there with your glasses, and you look like you got a haircut. It's looking sharp. So that's the meanest I want to get. Okay. But yeah, you're being kind of a jabroni when it comes to that game and the performance and like needing it to be peak elite, perfect time, everything.
It was frankly it was a mess when it came out on PS5, at least. But
I never noticed anything. I beat that game, and it was like the fastest I beat a game.
I don't know how, George. I mean, to be fair, I will say this. I say I don't know how you didn't notice anything, but at the same time, like, the game is going to run differently on different systems, depending on, little inconsistencies with the chipsets. So I've heard several people say they didn't have any issues, but mine, like, I'll never forget, like, booting it up in the very first cutscene. I guess mild spoilers for a game that's been out for almost a year, but the very first cutscene in that like tutorial area where you're going through and you find the senator and they come through and like kill your two partners. I'll just never forget that cutscene happening and it literally dropping to like a slideshow. And I was like, oh no. God, no.
I didn't have any big, massive frame drops like that. I noticed a couple times, I don't know what this is called. You're a lot smarter than me when it comes to technical stuff, but like something that like a cloth item that is like something that has like its own physics and like its own gravity or whatever. Sometimes like the corner of it will get pinned to something else. So it like stretches across the screen to a fixed point. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's like the collision effects are not correct. I don't know what the term would be, but I know what you're talking about.
It like causes it's like its own like horizon line basically between like it's always a cloth object. It's never like the dude's hand. It's always like a cape. This happens in Helldivers too, where it doesn't get like stuck, but it looks like it's being stretched. It no longer looks like the item it is at a certain point, and it's just like the color palette of whatever it is, and it's always like fixated on like a pole or something like and like you'll turn around and sometimes that'll fix it. Most of the time it won't. I noticed that a bunch with Fallen Survivor. Is that what it's called? Jedi Survivor. Sorry, Fallen Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, that one.
So I noticed that sometimes, but like that was like the worst of it. That and like anytime I had to do a puzzle with like the paste stuff that you threw. There was nothing wrong with it. I just suck at those types of puzzles. So those are my two biggest issues with that game.
Yeah, I've been trying to focus more so on Doom and Fortnite, so I haven't like really gotten into it. But I will say I've probably played maybe 2 hours. I just restarted my save because it had been so long. I really only played 5-6 hours, I think, when it originally came out. So, but point being, of the 2-3 hours that I've played so far, I mean, it seems like they've kind of fixed every problem I had. So I'm looking forward to getting into it more. But I'm one of those people that I feel like I have a hard time playing two like single player games at the same time. So Doom and Jedi at the same time is not really working for me. So I'm trying to kind of hold off on Jedi a little bit until I finish up Doom. So hopefully I can do that within the next few days here. But
I'm torn because as we record this, my girlfriend's going away for like 5 days. She's going down to Boston to go to opening day and like hang out with friends and stuff.
Nice.
I'm really excited for her. So in my head, I'm like, hey man, like you're gonna have completely uninterrupted access to the TV, so you should just fucking ball out this weekend. And I'm like, you know what you should do is you should do all the DLC for Far Cry so you can be released from this goddamn prison you're in.
Dude, don't. And then you don't need to do that.
And then on the other hand, I'm like, no, I kind of want her to be here because I can see that game giving me an aneurysm, and if it does, I want her to be around.
Somebody to call 911. Yeah,
pretty much. So that's my not sure if I should, not sure if I shouldn't situation I'm going into.
Don't do it.
No,
don't do it.
Yeah, but I lost a bet. I'm trying to honor the bet. I think he gave me an out where like I donate $150 to a charity of his choice. Which I'm kind of open to.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing, to be fair.
But also, I did buy all the DLC already, so I don't really know what to do. I should still, I don't know.
Well, if you play it, maybe just have like 911 like dialed up on your phone and ready to go. That way, you can just hit the dial button,
the call button,
if something happens. So
iPhone users have this cool thing where if you press the on-off switch 3 times in a row, it automatically brings up SOS. I've never had an aneurysm, so I don't know how likely I am to do that in the event of one, you know?
So my watch has something like that. I have one of the Samsung watches, and I think the Samsung phone does the similar thing where if you hit the lock button 4 times or whatever it is, it'll send out this SOS. But when I first got my watch, I was going through the settings and I was like, what does this do? And I hit it. And I noticed it was calling 911, so I like immediately hit stop. I mean, nobody had even picked up. But at the same time, it sent out messages to like everybody in my family, and it was like, Austin's in severe danger. Please, please contact him or find him immediately. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
So I had to call everybody in my family in the span of like 2 minutes to tell them, like, no, guys, I'm okay. I just got a new watch. That was it. I just got a new watch.
You're an adult in 2024. Do you have a physical alarm clock or do you use your phone?
So I used to use my phone, but what I have now, and I think Seth actually has the same thing, my mom bought me for Christmas 2 years ago, is one of those, like, it's a physical alarm clock, but it's got those lights on the front, so it like slowly turns on and like wakes you up to like a kind of natural sunlight type thing. So that's what I use.
Okay, because I use my phone still. And I'll think I'm turning down my alarm in my sleep. But what I'm actually doing is that emergency services thing. It's like, would you like to call? And like, that's actually what wakes me up, is the idea that I'm accidentally calling emergency services.
That is so funny.
Works like a charm. I've woken up every day this year so far, you know?
Yeah. So, George, I think the big topic we wanted to talk about here, and this is a good topic for us, I think, and for this crew that we've got with the two of us on the show right now, is kind of the pull to older games and, a pull away from the newer stuff and a look more at the past. And, for me, that's coming in the form of, right now I'm still playing, like I said, Doom and Fortnite and all these other somewhat more modern games, but I'm beginning to really feel this, I guess, mental push to like go back to the past. And this is not necessarily a new thing, because even in my goals for the year, when we did that episode, whenever that was, first week or two of January this year, one of my goals was to, I forget my exact verbiage on this, but I think it was something like play more games that were from the PS3 era or prior. I forget exactly how I worded it on that episode, but it's something I've been thinking about for a while, because there's so many games coming out that are quality and, are fantastic in various ways. But at the same time, I don't know, there's something about new games that is not entirely clicking for me. And I don't want to cast like this broad stroke on every single game that comes out. But at the same time, I'm finding myself, like, as the years go on, less and less interested in new releases as they come out. Like this year, for example, I just got to be honest, there's really nothing that I'm interested in. I mean, Nintendo games are a couple, but even though the biggest one I'm interested in is a freaking remake with Thousand Year Door.
Yeah.
So
my two favorite games I've bought my favorite game I bought so far this year is definitely like Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which is a remake. And then what I'm looking forward to most is probably Thousand Year Door.
Yeah.
And it's like there's one game coming out this year, Star Wars Outlaws, which, let's be real, like, it's probably gonna get fucking delayed. Like, I don't like it, just with the nature of modern game development, and like they should delay it if they think they have to. Like, stop putting out dookie games. It's not. I don't want to say it's not that hard. It's incredibly complicated, but like, just don't put out a game in a situation to fail, I guess, is like the frustrating thing. And it seems like studios are really eager to do that. I totally get it. I looked up our chat. Our text, and your exact quote was, "I'm sorry. May I read your text on the
You're
air?
good. You're good.
I'm feeling the pull more and more to start going back to older games. Grabbed GTA 4 on Steam this week because it was on sale for $6. Never played it."
Yep.
And then a coach. I don't have permission from him, so I'm not going to read what he said. He was celebrating that generation of games, and you said,
Yes.
"Yep." And so many available on Steam that we can play now at 1440p with mods and maxed out settings. Good time to revisit them. And like, I think you're tapping into something, because literally the next day I saw an article in The Guardian that was talking about the Gen Z trend, especially like on social media platforms like TikTok, towards like nostalgia bait shit,
Yeah.
And it's just like the proliferation of old video game soundtrack samples across modern music, and people quote unquote acting like NPCs as like a trend on TikTok. And it's just shit that doesn't frankly like really happen in modern games as much as it did from games 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so like talk to me. Like you mentioned like the max settings, you mentioned like the cheap price, but like why specifically why did that one jump out, GTA 4?
GTA 4, I think for me that stuck out, one, because again, it's dirt cheap. And so that was an immediate pull for me. But at the same time, that it really, what it comes down to is like that, for an example, was a game that at the time my parents frankly would not have allowed me to play. So I just never even had the opportunity to play that game. And 5 is really the only Grand Theft Auto game I've played of any consequence. I played a bit of Chinatown Wars, which, dude, great game.
Amazing game. PSP or DS? What'd you do?
I played DS. That was the version I played.
That is the best way to play it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I played a little bit of that, but when it comes to 4, like I just remember everybody talking about 4 at that time. Like I had all my friends, and I guess that would have been, gosh, what year did 4 come out? I can't even recall.
2007 or 8.
Yeah. So I would have been in middle school.
I think I was a senior in high school. So it was 2007 into 2008.
Yeah. I would have been in middle school, and like the bulk of my friends in middle school, their parents were nowhere near as restrictive as mine. And so they were always talking about Grand Theft Auto 4 and how they were playing it all the time. And that was the only game they played. And, you know, I know this is I'm focusing on one game here that we're talking about. So this is not exactly the whole reason I'm going back to retro, but just for 4, you know, I just saw it and was like, man, I have always wanted to play that. It is $6 and I can play it in the best possible format, you know, almost 20 years later. And so I don't know. And I think a lot of it for me, like, goes back to, even though I didn't play the game at the time, goes back to thinking about the PS3 generation, the PS2 generation, because those were the best to me. Yeah. Those 2 generations. And I'm sure it's just pure nostalgia, you know, of that was the best time of my childhood.
No, I've been thinking about this. We had a conversation with Seth where I think he said like one of the most salient things he's said on this show.
Yeah.
One of my 2 favorite things he's ever said on the show. And what he said was like, no, it just kind of seems like we've figured games out. Like we figured out how to like make the most money from them. So like the experimentation phase of gaming is over. Right. And that was prime experimentation phase. And that was also when small studios could afford to make games that would come out on PlayStation 2. So I think that's why it's your favorite. Obviously, it's nostalgia too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You want to feel the way you did when you were 14, 12. I don't know how old you were when PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 were out. Maybe a little younger.
Yeah, a little younger than that. PlayStation 2, I would have been, I don't know how old I would have been when it released, but I know I got mine when I was like maybe 9, 10.
Okay, I got mine when I was 10. It came out when I was 10.
Yeah.
So like that was.
I was
like,
a little late to it.
Yeah. But like no, I think that's like obviously part of you wants to feel the way you did when you were 10 years old and playing something like that for the first time. Like it's incredible. It's such a powerful pull to want to feel that way again. But I also just think like aesthetically and philosophically, games are so different now that there is something really special about those games.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's, I don't know, there's just something about those eras to me that are exciting compared to what we're getting now. And, you know, it's even stuff like, and, you know, I know you're planning on playing the series this year, and it's, again, as I've already mentioned in the show once, it's one of my all-time favorite series, but Metal Gear Solid, like, I'm just dying to go back to. And so today I grabbed the Master Collection on PS5 because it was on sale for like $30 on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So I got that because I was like, I've played those games probably 5 times each at this point, all 3 of them, but it's still exciting to me. Like, it's still, there's something so creative about those games that I just don't feel from anything that releases these days. So I don't know when I'll get the Grand Theft Auto 4, but at some point I'll get to it, and I'm excited to play it and kind of see what it's like, because my understanding, you may have more knowledge of this than me, George, but my understanding was when 4 came out, everybody was talking about it and loved it, but there was a brief little period, I feel like I remember this, like a couple years after 4 came out, where people were like, it's not that special. Like, it's a fine Grand Theft Auto. But now I'm hearing more and more people say, like, no, it's actually like one of the best.
You're absolutely right. I remember I didn't even know it came out, and I went with friends to Walmart and we just saw it on 360. It was a 360 timed exclusive. I think like the first year it was only on 360. And also like PlayStation 3, I don't think it was even fucking out yet. So like what does it matter? You know? And so I remember like going and grabbing it, and like Vice City is one of my favorite video games of all time. Like, I have the PlayStation 4 remaster trophy. I have the PlayStation 5 remaster platinum trophy. Like, I fucking love that game. I've forgotten more about that game than I think a lot of people will ever know, kind of deal. Like that is what that game is to me. Dude, I fucking hated 5. I hated 5 so much because I thought they just... It's not that they changed the story. It wasn't like, oh, you got to play darts at the bar or like go on a date or whatever. Like, it wasn't any of that shit. It was the driving that killed me because it felt like you were just fucking steering a boat the entire time. And so because of that, I never went back to it. And then what everyone talks about being like the coup de grace when it comes to Grand Theft Auto 4 is the Battle of Gay Tony. And I forget the name of the other DLC. It's over on my shelf. I just can't see it from here. Not Liberty City Stories, because that was the PSP game, but
something like that, though.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
It's something like that. But like the Battle of Gay Tony is like, no, this is Apex level. This is Paramount level, critical Grand Theft Auto. And then that was like the softening where that began. And I think people warmed up to the mechanics and the feel of that game through the DLC packs. Battle of Gay Tony and The Damned, right? Was the other one?
Lost in the Damned?
Yes, Lost in the Damned.
Yep.
And so those DLC packs were really, really well regarded. I think that sort of brought about like the reevaluation of where Grand Theft Auto 4 landed for everyone. I am inspired by you going back, so I will also go back. You let me know when you start that game, and I'll throw it fired up on PS3. Also, I spend probably like realistically 12 hours a day in my office, because that's like where my work computer is. It's where I'm on my personal computer right now. It's where I have like a bunch of comic books. It's where I store my PS3 and my Switch games. The only consoles I have set up in my office are my GameCube and my PlayStation 3. Because I don't want like the PlayStation 5. I'm like, no, that's me sitting on the couch with a glass of wine time.
Right.
But something about these games, it just feels so good to like, oh, I got 20 minutes before a meeting. Like maybe I'll fire up a little Sunshine, see how that goes. Also, don't do that. Mario Sunshine sucks. Like that game.
Don't play it.
Fucking sucks.
Don't play it.
Yeah, it's a bad game.
Hey, so I wanted to say right quick, just sorry to butt in, George, but Hamilton in the chat said two things. He said, I think going back to me saying my parents wouldn't let me play Grand Theft Auto 4, he said his parents didn't even let him watch SpongeBob, which is interesting.
That's tough, my guy. Hamilton, sorry to hear that.
My parents didn't let me watch Scooby-Doo when I was really young. Which doesn't make sense.
Too scary, or
I guess they told me that there were demons and stuff in the show, but if you ever watched the show, you knew that wasn't true. So
it was always like an amusement park owner or some guy who wanted to buy the amusement park after convincing everyone that there was a ghost or a demon.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the other comment he had though, George, and this is an interesting one. He said, I still want to go back to Star Wars The Force Unleashed on PlayStation 2. Specifically, which is interesting.
Ooh, that is actually a great version of the game.
Yeah.
And I say that I played the 360 version. I remember I was supposed to have a date that night, and then I found out that game came out. I was like, oh, sorry, I can't make it. So I blew off a date. It's okay. Everything worked out. I'm with someone I really care about now. But man, I love that game on 360. And then I did my junior year abroad, and I was just looking for cheap PSP games at the time. And I got Force Unleashed for $10. And the PSP version of Force Unleashed, the only one you played?
That's the only version I played, and it is so good.
Fucking incredible. And so I think that is basically the same version as the Wii version, which is basically the same version as the PlayStation 2 version. They added waggle stuff, which I think you can get on Switch now, right? With the waggle.
Yep.
No, the PS2 version is incredible. You're actually fighting like in the Jedi archives. You're like in the library. Like you're just doing all this weird random shit that you never did in like the quote unquote main game. No, that game rips, Hamilton. You're onto something here, man.
Yeah, it's so good. It's a shame Force Unleashed 2 was not as good, although I still thought it was fine. I still enjoyed it.
Like I said, I was studying abroad my junior year. I came back for Christmas break, and I definitely like on the way home, I was like, can we please stop by Walmart or Target or something? I definitely bought Force Unleashed 2. I was like, all right, man, I'm going to play this all break. And I stayed up all night. I beat it in one night. I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, I've been waiting 2 months to play this game, and like, this is the whole game? Yeah. God, I was so mad, but
while we're on this topic
and plat it. Yeah.
Here's something I want to try. I have not tried this before. I don't even know. I need to do some research on it. But, we're talking pretty heavily about PlayStation 3 and having for the past 15, 20 minutes here. I want to try now that I've
in the past like 60 episodes. Let's be real. 148 episodes.
Now that I have like this pretty great computer, I really want to try the PS3 emulator and see like how things run on that. I want to see if you can get things like Dolphin You know, if you can get GameCube games running really high res on there, I wonder if you can get PlayStation 3 games similarly running, you know, at higher frame rates or at higher resolutions. I really don't know because I haven't looked into that emulator at all. But I know obviously that the PS3 with that beautiful cell processor is very hard to emulate. So I don't know, you know, what the reality is there of like making it look better or not.
Fuck it, let's do that. Let's rent some servers, start hosting. Let's bring Mag back from the dead.
Dude, let's do it. Let's do it. I miss Mag, man. That game is so good.
You plus me means we only need 254 other people to get a full game going. So fuck it, let's run it back. You know, there's
got to be somebody out there that's like soft modded Mag or something and got custom servers going. I feel like that's got to be a thing. Mag.
So you being reminded that you got this new computer reminds me that since you got this new computer, I need you to do me a favor.
Okay.
I need you to learn how to back up game files from disk, so I don't lose all my Xbox games and all my GameCube games. Because like
Understood.
I've been researching what I'm finding out is like I just need to buy a Wii. If I buy a Wii, I can do like my entire GameCube library.
Yes. That was like the coolest thing that I didn't know you could do when I'm have the modded Wii, and it's super easy to do. Like you literally just go through, and I'll send you a video at some point or something. But I'm pretty sure it's been years since I've done it. But I think you like literally just put in an SD card with a file on it, and like you open it up, and then it does it itself, and now you've got a modded Wii. And
probably why they don't let you put SD cards into your consoles.
That's right. But you can load any, you know, GameCube games and save them as ISOs, I guess is what they are for GameCube, not ROMs. But you can save them that way. And then Wii games as well. You can also put in Wii games and save them that way. So, and then you can play them off a hard drive, like hooked up to the USB on the back. So there's so many cool things you can do with a modded Wii that I did not realize.
I have had one glass of wine. I'm like 1.5 more glasses of wine away from just buying a Wii on eBay tonight and getting started on that. I have such a massive GameCube library. Like I'm looking at it right now. I have like 3 bankers boxes full of GameCube games, and I'm like, dude, I need to back that shit up. And like I have at least another bankers box full of Wii games. Wasn't as into my Wii. I tried to be. Red Steel 2 was cool though. That game was good.
So I know this is going back like several minutes, but I've as we've been talking, I've just kind of had this pulled up on the side and just kind of looking around. It does appear that somebody is attempting to make a Mag multiplayer, like homebrew private server. So somebody is attempting to do it. I don't know if anybody is playing on said server, but it may be out there.
I don't know, man. Like they were closing down the servers for Battlefield Bad Company 2 in December. I got into a lot of full games on PS3 still, man. Like I was able to get the platinum, really happy, really proud of myself. I met some cool dudes who just gave a shit about trophies, you know, and they were like normal trophy hunters. They weren't assholes. They're like, yeah, no, like it just kind of bothered me that I was at like 70% completion and I wanted to get it before I couldn't. But man, like if you have like a sick ass game, you're going to have a fan base a decade and a half later. Like it's just gonna happen.
It's true,
you know. And so you talked about like the old games. I talked a little bit about like the revival that this aesthetic is having. Do you think there's anything else to it? Because you talked about the cheapness and the ability to play them in way better settings than when they were released. So it's just like the ultimate version of the game now that it's been so long since it released. I talked about the philosophy, I guess, technically. But like, let's talk about something else for a second. Can we just talk about, besides nostalgia, just how nice it feels to play something that's completed, and to play something completed from an era that just had what seems like a different set of values than today.
I mean, that's an important note to bring up because. And hey, I should say this too. Not only are these games completed, but they're not broken for the most part. I shouldn't say that about every game. I mean, certainly there were games that were released on PS2 that were a disaster.
Never
weren't finished. I mean, certainly those exist, but I'd say in mass that is not the case compared to now.
Yeah. Let's not go full rose tinted glasses.
Right.
There were so many games I bought on original Xbox that were just fucking bad games. They were just bad. They got me with marketing. They got me with just like a cool cover. They got me because it was immediately thrown into like the $20 bin at Walmart, and I could afford that, whatever, as like a high schooler. He worked at some shitty t-shirt shop. Like one way or another, they got me, and they were just fucking bad. And like there are some games that really outkick their coverage. Like on original Xbox, the one game that comes to mind is Pariah, which is like an awesome first-person shooter that just runs like absolute horseshit on the hardware. And I'm sure if you were to buy that game on PC, you're gonna have yourself a time. I'm sure it'd be amazing, but just at the time, it's just like, Jesus Christ, like I can't believe I burned $25 on this,
Right. Just, I guess my statement would be like, there's something, and again, I think this goes back to why everybody's going back to retro games or thinking more so about retro games, is there's something about just being able, for the most part, to look at an older game and say like, oh yeah, it's done. There's the game. Like that's what it is. Whether that's physically on a cartridge or disc, or something that you procured somehow digitally, versus today, where, and again, not to paint this broad brush over every single game that releases, but for the most part, every single game has a massive day one patch. Every single game has content being added or removed in some way throughout the years. I mean,
every game feels like a first pancake at this point.
Yeah. And to be honest, it seems to me that nearly every single game that has multiplayer is a mess upon launch at this point. And, multiplayer is a different conversation because it's kind of, again, hard to go back to those older games and experience that same multiplayer like with Mag, like we were talking about. But, obviously we've seen this shift from single player to a more multiplayer driven industry. And so I still think it's important to bring up, even though it wasn't quite as important back in the day. But like Helldivers, for example, I talked about this last episode. I still think that game is excellent, but like it still has problems where Andie and I, for example, we haven't played in a little bit because we kept trying to play her on PC and me on PS5, and neither of us could add each other as friends. It's supposed to have crossplay, and it's still a mess. It is still broken. And that game's been out for, what, 2 months?
I'll be in a party with people, and I will see on PlayStation that they are Helldivers, like on the bridge or like whatever cute in-game thing it says. And then I will go to the menu and like it says they're offline. I'm like, but I know they're not offline. Like there's, and I'm trying not to, like, I'm trying to give them a little bit of grace.
Yeah, I agree.
Making game is complicated, especially small team, and they didn't go out on like a hiring frenzy to get a whole bunch of people just to lay them off once the problem was solved. So like I actually like really commend that. They are kind of taking it all themselves, so like that's respectable. So I'm willing to forgive them, especially it's a video game. Like it ultimately doesn't fucking matter. Like people are dying all over the world. I'm gonna sit here and pretend a video game matters. It doesn't, but in its own context, like yeah, they fucked up, but I'm way more forgiving of this team fucking up than like Call of Duty fucking up. Like some place that has like unlimited resources, especially now.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, speaking of Call of Duty, looking at these massive series now and massive series 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just to pick on Call of Duty, you've got all these games that have come out and have various problems, whatever they may be, whether that's like as far as the quality of the game or otherwise, but then look back 10, 15 years ago and man, I don't know. Again, maybe this is just pure nostalgia, but like looking back on COD 4 and Black Ops and like all those games of that era, they were just good games and they were complete and they worked and they were fun. So I don't know. I hate to be like a grumpy old 28-year-old on this podcast.
No, and
But
that's what's really tough about this conversation because like I think as subjective as we were, we still had like a little objectivity at the beginning of our conversation.
Yeah.
But also like at this point we're kind of slipping into like,
Yes.
well, the reason that Marvel's movies aren't as good now is because like they're like just make good movies. Like what's so hard about it? It's like, yeah, you're right, but also it's like there's been at this point now almost 20 years worth of Marvel movies. Like they have to do something different. And the reason they did it the way they did the first time was because they thought that would work. So like they have to tweak the formula to give you something new, and like games are doing that too. And like we were talking about older games earlier, and I like a bunch of older games, but like I'm really enjoying a lot of like modern games I'm playing too. And I liken it to music where it's like I don't really care for the Beatles, but all my favorite bands, their favorite band was the Beatles. And so just like looking at games through that lens where it's like, okay, I think I'm really enjoying Helldivers. I would not enjoy Dark Souls, which like I'm not saying this game is taking a lot of inspiration from Dark Souls, but like the natural difficulty of it, you know, like the pervasive way the world is to like in the hardness of it is the intentionality of it, like it's on purpose. I'm like, oh well, I don't like what it's taking inspiration from, but man, I really fucking like this. And so like just finding studios that are taking the right lessons from the older games to make new games. And I think the problem with a lot of newer games is that they're taking wrong lessons from game. Like, I'm worried that the new Star Wars game, Outlaws, is going to be like fucking Madden Ultimate Team. You know, like I'm worried that Ubisoft is going to try to find a way to monetize. And like, granted, they didn't really do that with Far Cry 6 or anything, or the Avatar game, which I bought for some fucking reason. I still don't know why.
Did you play any of that? Just, I know that's random, but did you play any of that? That game looks gorgeous.
I played like 3 hours of it, and then I realized it's literally just Far Cry. And I'm like, bitch, I just did this. Like, I'm going to need to wait a little bit longer before I jump into it. It is stunning. It is so cool. It is... I really like the Avatar world. I hated the second movie so bad. But I love the first one. And I think Big Jim... Mount Rushmore status, like that dude's just fucking incredible, you know. So I want to give it a chance.
Yeah, sorry to derail that. I was curious.
It's cool. I tried too soon after I ripped off the Far Cry 6 Bandit, unfortunately. But like I'm just worried that like we're learning the wrong lessons, you know. And so like you see the way one game was successful, and you imitate the wrong quality from that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of what Marvel's doing, where it's just like, oh, well, like we got to go big. It's like, no, the reason big worked is because you started small. So you actually like it's like breathing. Like you need to exhale so you can inhale. And like you just finished exhaling with Endgame, so like you got to start the inhale. You can't start at the top. You got to build it back up. And like that's actually the problem I think with like the current MCU.
Yeah.
And that I think is the problem with current games is that like, oh, we have to have a recurring revenue stream. It's just like, no, you don't. Just make a fucking cheaper game and be happy with sales. And then if you're encouraged to do so, release DLC that makes sense for it. You know, like I bought 3 War Bonds so far for fucking Helldivers. I haven't completed any of them. They just announced a new one that's coming out next Thursday. Guess what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna fucking buy it. You know, because like that feels like they're respecting me. They're respecting my time. They're respecting their own product.
You know, this feels like a good thing to bring up here in a way. Hamilton just asked, have y'all watched X-Men 97? I have not yet, but I just wanted to bring this. I do think this is actually worth bringing up because even though it's not a game, it's similar to what we're talking about because in a way, Marvel and Disney have gone back to this old series that people are very nostalgic of and made this seemingly excellent piece of media because they learned from what came before,
right? And
are continuing that. And so I wish games would do that same thing. But George, have you watched any of X-Men 97?
I actually haven't. The original X-Men series has been my fall asleep show. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I thought this was coming out later in the year, so I thought I had more time. And so I'm currently halfway through season 3, I think, of X-Men. So I'm getting there. So I hope to catch up because I host a comic book podcast, Hamilton. I don't know if you know, it's called Short Box Summary. All my timeline on Twitter is just curated to be comic book nerds. I'm not asking you to listen. Please don't think I'm doing that. I was just letting you know for context.
Ask you to listen.
Austin's going to ask you to listen. I will not ask you to listen. But my entire timeline is like 80% of them are so fucking on board and the other 20% are so offended. And it got to the point, this one guy I love so much. He's so young, but has just read everything. Like the dude has probably read more comics at this point than certainly than I did at his age, but like maybe even now. Like the dude is just a vacuum for comics, and he's just like, yeah, I think they adapted the wrong series. They should have made a sequel to Kitty Pryde and the X-Men, which was like a failed X-Men cartoon from like 2 years earlier before like the 1992 X-Men.
That is so specific.
Yeah, I think they sold it like at Pizza Huts. Like I think that's where we got our VHS.
That's intense.
Yeah. But it's mostly positive, and then like the diehards are like, look how they massacred my boy. Like it's mostly positive but a little divisive at the same time. But I think you're right. Like, but appreciate it, like taking the right lessons from nostalgia and not just nostalgia bait for nostalgia bait's sake.
So I wanted to say this, and this is probably really my last point when it comes to the older games and why I appreciate them and want to go back to them and find them appealing, is because visually, I feel like a lot of the games we're getting, and not that this hasn't been the drive for a couple generations now, but I feel like a lot of the games we get, at least from the big publishers, are all going for this like photorealistic look. That's what they're all aiming for, which is a rightful cause. I think that's something that's excellent to try and figure out. The better we can make games look, that's super exciting. Alan Wake 2 looks freaking unreal. And that Avatar game, Digital Foundry gave that their best graphics of 2023 last year, and rightfully so, because it is gorgeous.
Wait, really? Over
everything else. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I think what I also find interesting and appealing about these older games, and why I'm finding that my pull to go back is that rather, while they were trying to get as photorealistic as they could, that was just not possible. That was like not even remotely possible on the PS2 or PS3. And so for that extent, or for that reason, I feel like visually a lot of those games had to be really creative. Like I think about something like Warhawk.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's going for a photoreal, but at the same time, it's got like a toy soldiers, like, 90s like army type feeling. Like it's very cartoony, and you just saw a lot of games of that style, and I appreciated that, 15, 20, 25 years ago. So
I agree, man. Like I think art direction is, unfortunately, I don't think it's going away. I just feel like their goals are less interesting than they used to be. And it's like, was it Uncharted Lost Legacy? Like that game,
the one that with Chloe and Nadine.
Yeah, like those games were going for realism in a way that I thought made them not fun. And like same thing with Uncharted 4. Like you compare Uncharted 4 to Uncharted 3.
Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 are like cartoony, and people don't realize that looking back on them.
And I personally like that more. I like there to be like a separation of my life and the video game's life. And so I didn't mean to shit on Lost Legacy specifically, but that was the most recent one I played, so it just stuck with me, where I was like looking at wreckage of a building that I was trying to sneak past some guards, and it's like one of the first things you do in the game. And I was just like taken aback by like how much detail there was. I'm like, this is kind of unnecessary for like the story you're trying to tell. Like, I don't think you guys needed to do all this. And same thing with Uncharted 4, where like even the movement, just like you can feel like each individual step that Drake and Chloe are taking. And I'm like, you guys are kind of doubling down on like the thing that you want to go for. So like, who am I to shit on the thing that you find interesting, the thing you find to be the goal you want to meet? But as a consumer, I'm just like, this isn't what's interesting to me, And so like you look at a game like, Dragon Quest 11 or something. The fact that like that game has like personality is so much more important to me than an impressive level of capture. But like if you make a windowsill look like a real windowsill, it's like, fucking congrats, man. Like you did it. You won the video game game of graphics, that you made that windowsill look exactly like a real windowsill. But it's not interesting. Like show me a little more creative. Like you're showing me technical prowess, but show me a little more creativity.
Yeah,
you know.
there's nothing. I guess the problem is there's still something creative in a way, because you've got, as you become more photorealistic, you have more of a drive for like cinematography and lighting that you probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So there's still creativity there, but
For sure, yeah.
I agree with you. Like when it comes to art directions, it just seems like it's become less of a focus, I guess is the best way to put it.
I think if more impressive but less interesting, right?
Yeah. So to that point, I think that's why I find, I know I'm not like the frankly majority opinion on this, but I think that's why I find Nintendo games actually the most interesting right now. And I know we've talked about this before, but they have a piece of hardware that is so limited that like they're not going to be able to get photorealistic graphics on the Switch. And I'm sure they won't be able to on the Switch 2 either, whatever that ends up being. But because of that, they are figuring out how to make these like beautiful games run and look good using unique art styles and unique art directions on this obviously outdated piece of tech that they're continuing to support. So I really respect them for that reason, and that's why I will always continue to kind of champion them as long as they continue down this path.
Well, to their credit, they've been doing that forever, though.
Yeah, that's all they've always been. Really, going back to the 64.
I mean, Xbox was the most powerful console of that generation, right?
Yeah.
Everyone thinks PlayStation 2 was the next one. It's not, actually. Like, GameCube actually has like a higher output than PlayStation 2 does. And so that was the last time it seemed like they really gave a shit about graphics. And like the Wii gets made fun of a lot, and it deserves most of the heat it gets, right? But I don't know, man. I think of a lot of games from that era, from the 360, PS3, Wii era. I don't know if it was like browns and grays and like yellows and whatever just like looked better in HD at the time than like a bright blue. You know, like how I think we talked about this before, but like the best color in the world is Sega blue.
Yes.
You know, like an ocean in like a Dreamcast game just looks like the best an ocean's ever looked. Yeah. Super Mario Galaxy, I would stack up as one of the best looking games from that generation. And it was outputting at 480i, 480p, right? Like it did not have, it was not like a technically impressive game. But the fact that they were able to hide that console's shortcomings through art direction and through like a steady frame rate makes that game really fucking stand out in a way that's just not as recognized as it is today. But you're right, man. Like Mario vs. Donkey Kong is absolutely gorgeous. And then you know what? Like the fact that it's really fun to play with such like a limited tool set, it's like, man, can you imagine how much money they spent making this game compared to the last major remake a studio did, like fucking Demon Souls? And like I know those games have two different objectives, I understand, and they're made for two different audiences, they're made from two different previous iterations, I get all that. But the fact that like Nintendo moneyballs remakes and they look spectacular, and other studios are like really living in the fucking margins when they do something like that, like Nintendo is onto something that I hope the rest of the industry picks up on. Because there's a bunch of games that's trapped on old hardware that I would just love to see. Like, I was shocked we got a Medieval remaster on PS4. That made me really happy because I thought that game deserved to be around again. And I hope we see more of that. Do you like the remake trend as we're talking about it, or do you prefer, like, you said you just bought like the Metal Gear Solid, like that's not like they didn't go back and like touch up anything, they just made it run on modern hardware, right?
It's literally just a port. In fact, I think it's actually slightly worse than the HD remakes on PS3 and 360. 360, yeah. But it is what it is. It's the easiest way to play them in this day and age. But
do you prefer that, or do you want like more like a Mario vs. Donkey Kong makeover?
I think it depends on the game, to be honest. Like, just as an example, you know, again, good discussion point here. Metal Gear Solid 3, they're fully remaking, and it looks great. But I think the problem I always have when they do these full remakes is like, is it actually going to be good? Because it's still, even though it's based off of an older game, it is still part of this new generation of, just as we've been talking about, for the past 20 minutes of broken games and games that are less, I don't know, creative than they used to be. And so, hopefully the Metal Gear Solid, I think it's Delta is the name of the 3 remake. I hope it's great, because there are some great examples of excellent remakes that like needed a remake. And Resident Evil 2 was really good on PS1, but if you try to play that PS1 version, holy crap, good luck doing that in 2024. Go play the remake of Resident Evil 2, because it takes what was presented in the original and like amplifies it by 10. And that is the perfect remake, in my opinion, is Resident Evil 2.
And it makes it contextual to today's audiences, right? Like it makes sense playing games today, and it is a faithful reinterpretation and representation of the original.
So I like those. I like them as long as they're faithful and take what was presented in the original and doesn't remove anything or change anything any major ways. It just expands on what was given at that time and updates it for new technology. So like, the I guess to stick with horror games here, I know the Dead Space remake, I haven't played it yet, but I've heard great things that they essentially did similar stuff there, where it's the same Dead Space. It just is gorgeous and like runs really well now and plays really, really smooth compared to the original version. So I like them. I think it as long as it goes to the right team. So we'll see how Knights of the Old Republic is.
Oh man, that was in the news. Like, it's over at Saber now, and they're like, "Yeah, we're still working on it." It's like, okay.
But I'll just say this though, I'm talking about, I like the full remakes, but at the same time, I still like the ports. I think the ports are fine. I don't really have any problems with them. Make games more accessible for people.
Yeah, but that's the tough part. It's like, okay, this game, like, should it be brought up to 2024 standards, or should you just be allowed to play the original game? It's like, we were playing the Pixel remasters. Those are not the original games. Those have been transfigured into a new thing that is as like the original game as they can be, while still being palatable to modern audiences. And frankly, man, I looked up the old game trailers retrospective on Final Fantasy 1 and 2. I watched those like before I played 1 and 2. I don't want to fucking play those games. Those look like shit. Like, I want to play the remasters, but it also feels like a little unfaithful to say that, like, no, this is Final Fantasy 1. It's like, actually, it's not. This is just how you want us to remember it. And that's how I'm going to choose to remember it, but I don't know. There's 8 million other venues we could have jumped into with this conversation. I'm glad we hit what we did. Maybe we'll revisit, because it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, should you, like, do you have to play the classics? Like, if you really like movies, are you a bad movie fan if you don't go back and watch Citizen Kane? Like, maybe, but probably not. And like, we could have that conversation for games, but I think we should do that another night, Austin.
Yeah. If you don't watch Metropolis, you don't have an opinion on sci-fi. You cannot have an opinion on current sci-fi if you don't watch Metropolis. So I just don't trust a word you say.
Shut the fuck up about Kong, Godzilla, New Empire. If you've never seen Metropolis, you jabroni, I don't want to hear it.
Quick fire. This is my last question. What's your favorite, like, old ass movie? Like, way old. What's your favorite old movie?
My favorite movie of all time is Roman Holiday, which is the Audrey Hepburn, Gregory Peck movie from 1960. I think it was Audrey Hepburn's first movie. Okay. I like that movie more than Empire Strikes Back. I think it's probably like the best romantic comedy ever made. And then, dude, I gotta be honest, like, once a month, I'll pour a shit ton of wine into a giant pint glass. It's not true, but it might as well be true. It'd be easier if I did that. And I will watch Casablanca. I fucking love Casablanca. I think that movie is so cool. The tin sound of the audio recording. And like, I'm not trying to be like that elitist asshole who's talking about movies right now. I watch so many modern movies. Like, I watch so many 80s movies, 70s movies. So, like, I just fucking love movies. There's something real special about Casablanca, man.
Yeah, it's good. Vertigo. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, so good. So good.
Yeah. So that would probably be mine. But jokes aside, I actually do quite enjoy Metropolis. That was one that I watched in a film class in college, and I was like, this is surprisingly enjoyable.
It's really good. And it's just one of those things where it's like, wow, no one else was on this dude's level. Was it Fritz Lang, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, no one else was like smoking the same shit he was at that time,
And hey, it led to C-3PO.
Yeah,
So.
thank you. Human cyborg relations. Yeah.
That's right. So, all right, everybody. Thank you all for listening. George, any final words you've got here that you want to mention?
Yeah, sorry we were gone so long. We'll try to be back next week as well. Do you like recording on Thursdays? You want us to do Thursday next week?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I don't have a problem with it. So that works for me. And I will point out here, I guess, because we haven't really brought it up. I do think it's important to mention that Seth is going to be kind of away from the podcast for a little while. So I'm not sure when he'll return. And then it sounds like, maybe I shouldn't say this because I don't want to put it on the record, but it sounds like Coach may be more reliable.
Yeah.
To the podcast based off what he's been telling us. So while we're losing Seth partially for a little bit, it sounds like Coach may return. We'll see.
Who?
What? Who?
Oh, the older brother from the picture in Back to the Future. And we're back where we started, just like Back to the Future.
That's right. That's right. Back to the Future. What a great movie. All right, everybody. Adios. Thanks for listening to this episode of Frameskip. Don't forget you can find the show on social media at frameskippod. That's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also follow us each individually on Twitter. George is at Shortbox Summary, Seth is at Seth the 90s Kid, and I, Austin Eller, am at Austin J. Eller on Twitter. If you've got a question, comment, or topic you'd like to hear discussed on the next episode of Frameskip, you can do so by submitting it to us on social media. Email us at frameskippodcast@gmail.com or visit bit.ly/frameskipq. That's bit.ly/frameskipq. The show is typically live on YouTube every week, either on Tuesday or Wednesday. You can find our YouTube channel at bit.ly/frameskiplive. Don't forget to subscribe and be notified when we do go live, typically at about 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.